Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive of Wokingham Borough Council. My name's Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing and Partnerships, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. Can I just do the normal housekeeping announcements? Could you ensure any mobile phones or other mobile devices are switched off? There we go. And if you're participating via Teams, when you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphones? And please note also that the meeting is currently being webcast live. For those of you in the audience, you'll see there's quite a lot of people around these tables. I'm going to just introduce them to you so you know who's present. Over on that far table over there, which may not be entirely visible to you, we have two of our directors, George Framanico, who's Director of Place and Growth, and Matt Pope, who's the Executive Director for Adults, Children's and Health. And next to Matt is Sally Watkins, who's the Chief Operating Officer. And then we have behind me, Lucianne Bowker and Priya Patel from Democratic Services, and Andrew Moulton, who's the Council's Monitoring Officer, and the Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Finance Officer, Graham Ebers. Now, I'm not going to go around and introduce my colleagues. I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and we're going to start over here with Rachel.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Bishop-Firth. I'm the Executive Member for Equalities, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
Good evening, my name is Paul Fishwick. I'm the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways.
Good evening, my name's Lindsay Ferris. I'm the Exec Member for Planning and the Local Plan.
Good evening, my name is Clive Jones and I'm currently the Executive Member for Business and Economic Development. Another 5 hours, I think.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay. I'm the Executive Member for Finance.
Hi, I'm Sarah Kerr. I'm the Executive Member for Climate Emergency and Resident Services.
Good evening, I'm Ian Shenton, Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure.
Good evening, I'm David Hare, the Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Now, joining us online this evening is our colleague Prue Bray, who's the Executive Member for Children's Services. It's good to see you there, Prue.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry not to be there in person, but I'm at a conference where I'm doing lots of good stuff for the council.
You are indeed doing great work for the council, but it's very good that you're able to join us this evening. So Prue's now fully introduced. And as you note, she's attending online. I don't think there are any apologies for absence. So can we move now to the minutes of the previous meeting? And I sign those as an accurate record of our meeting. Somebody like to propose that I do? Paul, and seconded by Rachel. Everyone approves, I imagine. Yes. Thank you. Sign those. Okay, we now move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There is none. Excellent. And now I'm going to make a brief statement. Since the last council meeting, the work of the Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel, TLIP as it's called, has been recognised at the National Housing Awards. TLIP won in the category of excellence in community-led decision making. I want to take this opportunity to thank TLIP's chair, Steve Bowers, and the other tenant volunteers, the officers in the council's housing department and the elected members who are part of TLIP for their commitment to partnership working. The award is a just reward and reflects well on both the tenant volunteers and on the council. This is the last meeting of the executive that will be attended by Clive Jones, the executive member for Business and Economic Development. As I explained at the last full council meeting, Clive wishes to concentrate on his role as parliamentary candidate for Wokingham. I should like to thank Clive for his work as an executive member for Business and Economic Development and for his leadership of the council in 2022-23, the first year of the new administration. Clive's experience and determination helped the council greatly in the transition from one administration to another. And I'm sure all my colleagues will join me in wishing you, Clive, the best of luck in your parliamentary endeavours. Clive, as I announced at the last council meeting, will be replaced on the executive by David Cornish, who has been shadowing Clive for the last few months and has a background in business that's ideal preparation for his new role. Sarah Kerr, the executive member for Climate Emergency and Resident Services, is also leaving the executive. Sarah has been offered a job outside the council, which begins in January, and she is asked to be relieved of her executive duties to focus on her new role. Sarah has been an outstanding champion for the areas of her executive responsibility, and her hard work and commitment will be missed by all of us. I'm sure everyone will wish to join me in wishing Sarah well for the future. Sarah's executive responsibilities are wide-ranging, and I've decided, in consultation with the deputy leader, that it would be unfair to ask anyone to fill the vacancy and carry out all of these different duties for the few months until the local elections. We've therefore asked other executive members to take on additional responsibilities, and I'm very grateful for their all agreeing to do so. David Cornish has kindly consented to add climate emergency and arts and culture to his remit. David Hare will be taking the lead on violence against women and girls and domestic abuse. Rachel Bishop-Firth will be responsible for the website and digital. And I shall add to my own portfolio solar farms, libraries, customer services, and residents' engagement. That's the end of my statement. I think you wanted to say something, Clive.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. So it has been an absolute privilege to be on the executive with all of you for the last 18 months and to work with all of the senior officers in the council. I absolutely loved being the leader. I was absolutely delighted to hand over to you last May, Stephen, and I am very pleased to be leaving the executive now, because it means that I will have just that bit more time to concentrate on this very important general election campaign that is coming up and is going to give us, the Liberal Democrats, the best chance ever to have a Lib Dem MP. I'm very proud of some of the things that we've done on the council, introducing a bit more financial stability, balancing the budgets, to having a revised bus service improvement plan, saving buses from disappearing, from having a £250,000 hardship fund to help struggling families who are finding it hard to cope with the cost of living emergency, and of course providing money for free school meals during school holidays. All those things and many more are so important to what we've done over the last 18 months. So there is a tinge of sadness to be leaving, but there's an awful lot of optimism that it's the right thing for me to do. And I'm optimistic that the executive that you're still leading, Stephen, is going to continue to have another very good 6 months in this municipal year, and hopefully many more years after that.
Thank you, Clive. Sarah, I don't know whether there's something you would like to say.
No, thank you. I really appreciate everyone on the executive stepping up. I know I've caused some extra work for some of you, and but I do appreciate and it was a really difficult decision, but I am moving into a position which is going to be about decarbonising the energy system. So something I'm really passionate about, and it's not something I think I would have gone for if I hadn't had the opportunity I've had here, actually. And the position I've had here at the council has really helped me grow as a person as well. So I'm really grateful. And so thank you obviously to the executive, but I'd particularly like to thank officers as well, senior officers. I couldn't have done this role without you. I really appreciate the support. You know, when you first come in as an executive member, it is scary. I won't lie, it is scary. And that weight of responsibility and having the support from yourselves and your teams has been invaluable. And I will miss you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We're now moving to the next item on the agenda, which is public question time. And the first question is from Andy Bailey. Would you like to come up to the table, Andy? And if you sit next to Chris there, he'll move his coat so you can sit down. And you'll need to press the button there. Well, Chris will do it for you. Chris is going to be the compere for the handling of the questions. Andy, would you like to ask your question of the executive member for planning and the local plan?
Certainly, yes. Good evening, all. My name is Andy Bailey. I'm a resident of Arborfield. My question for the exec for local plan is, at a recent meeting with residents of Carter's Hill, it was stated by both a council officer and a University of Reading representative that WBC had requested an updated plan for Hall Farm with 3,750 dwellings as opposed to the previous plan for 4,500. It was also stated that this figure, 3,750, would not be adjusted even if central government finally publishes the revised NPPF and the housing target for Wokingham is reduced. Could you please confirm that this is the case and explain why the plans for Hall Farm would not be reduced as a result of any lower housing target for WBC?
Thank you, Andy, for your question. Since I took on responsibility for local plans, I have raised the concerns expressed by some residents towards the Hall Farm promotion led by the University of Reading, including the promotion scale of 4,500 homes. In response, the university have indicated that they are undertaking viability work looking at whether a lower scale of 3,750 homes would be viable, taking into account the infrastructure that will be need to be provided and anticipated landowner developer costs in delivering the garden village. This would represent a near 20% reduction. The results of this viability work have not yet been provided to the council, with our understanding being that it is ongoing. Turning to the anticipated revision to the National Planning Policy Framework, we are still waiting for the government. Whilst we are cautiously hopeful that the revised NPPFs will allow passed over delivery of housing to be taken into account when considering future requirements, we must wait and see. If confirmed, we will need to consider implications for our strategy as a whole. With regard to large development proposal, it is common for delivery of these to occur across a longer period. A proposal in the order of, for example, 4,500 or 3,750 homes would not be fully complete by 2040, with some completions extended in years beyond this.
Thank you, Lindsay. Andy, do you have a supplementary question?
Really, but not sure my ignorance always matters, but why is it, if 4,500 houses are to be constructed, why is it that they have to run beyond the 15-year plan?
Lindsay?
The answer is that if we take the current local plan that running to 2026, there are a number of developments, one in particular, that will not be completed before 2026. So when you work on getting through on a local plan, you cannot ever be able to be sure that developments will be completed in the 15 plus years that you have as a local plan. And we think it's probably best to indicate what would be the situation. I think the vast majority would be included in the period up to 2040, but there has to be some indication beyond that period that there may be houses that go into the period beyond. And as we have mentioned, the current local plan already has that happening.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Andy. You're very welcome to stay if you wish to do so, but you may have something better to do you may have something better to do with your evening. Thank you. And the next question is from Philip Meadowcroft. Philip, would you like to come up to the table? And I'm sure Chris will act as your monitor for the speaker as well. And Philip, I think you have a question for Executive Member for Finance and Governance. So if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Chairman. So far during 2023, £75 million has been loaned by the Council to other local authorities. This is confirmed on page 514 on the agenda on the website, 154 on the booklet that is available this evening in the meeting's agenda. With regard to the 10 million loan to Wokingham, the minutes of the council meeting on September 21 show the executive member for finance saying, quote, "We have a commitment from Wokingham that they will honour our debt of £10 million plus the interest that will come back with it. That repayment is due on March the 8th next year." 3 months ago, on August 23rd, Wokingham announced on its website that section 114 was declared because, I quote, "unaffordable borrowing, inadequate steps to repay that borrowing," unquote. The section 114 notice means that Wokingham's finances are subject to intense supervision by Whitehall appointed commissioners in a manner similar to that in the private sector when a firm declares bankruptcy and administrators and liquidators are appointed. Rather than relying on undefined, quotes, commitment from Woking, can the executive member for finance reply to this public question by exhibiting valid, straightforward and legally enforceable paperwork evidencing that there are no circumstances whatsoever which will prevent Woking from meeting its financial obligation to pay £10,356,000 back to Wokingham on March the 8th next year?
Thank you, Philip. Imogen?
Sure. Thank you for your question, Mr. Meadowcroft. When it comes to financial commitments, councils cannot be thought of in the same way as other organisations. This is because councils provide statutory services to residents of this country and are underwritten by central government. If a council is unable to produce a balanced budget, it issues what is known as a Section 114 notice, which is named after its section in the Local Government Act. In practicality, this means that commissioners are appointed, as you know, who are tasked with bringing the council's finances back under control, usually by selling their assets, cutting services and raising council tax. Money is often loaned to the council in the meantime from the Treasury to cover their immediate financial crisis, but they're still able to borrow money from elsewhere. There are specific statutory protections that are in the Local Government Act 2003 that protect us from the defaults when the counterparty to the loan is central or local government. This is also referenced in the CIPFA Code of Practice. CIPFA is the Chartered Institute of Private Finance Accountants, and there are additional protections in place for loans made by local government organisations. Part of the requirement of a Section 114 circumstance is that all contracts and financial commitments continue to be honoured. In the case of Wokingham, making a loan to Woking, there is indeed a legally binding contract in place before the loan was made. Our respective chief financial officers certainly spoke to each other to double check that the loan was indeed secured under these protocols. I reiterate, there has never been a situation where a council in a Section 114 state has defaulted on its payments, and other councils are one of the safest places for us to invest. A council defaulting on its payment would only happen if our government was unable to cover the costs, and I think we would have much bigger problems if that were to happen.
Thank you, Imogen. Philip, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. So in 60 seconds, I might have to give it a machine gun rate. 2 months ago at the September 21st council meeting, the executive member for finance answered a public question about the 10 million loan, saying all financial transactions and accounting are also required to meet regulations and processes set by the FCA. Yesterday, I contacted the FCA. They confirmed that Wokingham or any individuals connected with Wokingham are not registered with them and thus not authorised and not regulated by the FCA. It grieves me to say it, but the executive member for finance has materially misled that question on September 21st and the council regarding the council's connection or lack of it with the FCA to give regulatory backing to the council's loan or loans to distressed neighbouring councils. I'm afraid I found your reply inadequate because I've not seen any tangible evidence of the guarantee. There's no proof, as far as I can see, that the Wokingham loan repayment is guaranteed either by legally enforceable paperwork or a Treasury guarantee. And given that there is a total of £75 million of loans this year to various local authorities, which you'll see on page 154, that's the equivalent of putting at risk more than £1,000 per household throughout the borough. So, because you have misled the questioner and the council at the September 21st meeting about the FCA, would you not be considering your position?
I'm not quite understanding what you're talking about with the FCA, because I don't believe that is what I said. But certainly I can assure you that this regularly happens. It's been happening for 20 plus years that councils are lending money to each other in this way. And there has never been a problem with any council doing this. It doesn't matter to us whether a council is in section 114 state or not, because it's all underwritten by the Treasury. And that's really what, and the principles that we apply here are the SITFA Code of Conduct principles, and we also are bound to the Local Government Finance Act 2003. Well, there's Local Government Act 2003 and there's a Local Government Finance Act, which is, I can't remember what year that is, but there is that as well. And it's all mentioned in there because the SITFA guidelines that these guys use are leveraging the information that's in that act. And I believe it's section 6 through 13 are probably the pertinent bits. But you're welcome to go and have a look and ask the questions.
We've still got no evidence to show.
Philip,
Quotations are given on the minutes of the meeting.
Philip, I think you've had your supplementary, and I'm afraid you're not allowed to ask a second supplementary. Okay, well, I think we've got the purport of your questions. Obviously, Imogen has given you the best answer she can do in the circumstances. If you have any further concerns, please do contact me and we will try and address them. Okay, thank you. Right, we now move on to Ian Scott has a question for the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. I don't think Ian is he's not here in person and he's not online. So, I mean, we could simply provide Ian with a written response, but I think in the interest of transparency, not least because his question relates to an item that we're going to be coming on to shortly in the agenda, St Crispin's, I'm going to read out Ian's question, and then Ian, Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure, will read out his response. So Ian Scott has asked the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure the following question related to St Crispin's, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Costs and values that should be considered. 1, land asset. Value WBC suggests 1.5 million, modest to say the least, for 1.32 acres. 2, present value total loss of revenue for the 20 years life of the existing building, the centre profit, not specified. 3, costs connected with equalisation payment to places for leisure, for other leisure facilities, not specified. 4, cost of closure, not specified. 5, future cost of re-providing and he estimates 4 teaching spaces within the leisure building, which has a 20-year life compared to a 60-year life new build scenario, not specified. The 1 million pound dowry to Circle Trust. 7, people for places. Social value calculator estimates the social value of a typical centre to be a further 1.56 million. A simple addition of the WBC places for leisure figures, even without the missing figures requested above, gets perilously close to disproving the WBC good value argument. With full information requested, councillors could make the judgment with confidence. Why has a full analysis of the economic and social value being transferred still not being shown to councillors to allow them to make a properly informed judgment? Ian.
I thank Mr. Scott for his question. I can assure him that this is a good value proposition, and I need to correct some of his assertions. The leisure centre site has a theoretical land value of 1.5 million, but due to planning restrictions, in reality, it has a value for community use only. And that is what we would be seeking to protect through a legal agreement with the Circle Trust. Indeed, Circle Trust expressed their keen intent to continue the community provision of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee earlier this week. So there is no loss of value there. The leisure facility no longer operates at a profit, and therefore running leisure facilities out of this venue over 20 years or more will not be financially beneficial to a contractor or to the council. The cost of work needed for refurbishment to provide the education facilities whilst protecting community provision will be in excess of £1 million, and therefore WBC are only making a fixed capped contribution with Circle Trust funding all the other costs. This is therefore the total cost to WBC to secure the vitally needed education places for our Year 7 children, amounting to 330 places over 6-year forecasts, but will no doubt they will be needed indefinitely. This is an incredibly reasonable price to pay given the costs associated with school builds and school extensions. This is clear in the executive paper that states, I think that should say, that states, if I read the states a modular building required to provide for this number of children would be in excess of £5 million and up to 8 million, depending on the site location in the borough. Given Places Leisure and Circle Trust between them can accommodate all current users of St Crispin's Leisure Centre, with the exception of squash usage during the school day, the number of people with no continued offer is very small. These squash players could book further out of school hours sessions through Circle Trust, as I understand they already book out of hours as well as daytime, or they can use other squash facilities in the vicinity. It is hard to think that with any stretch of the imagination, this inconvenience, although regrettable, compares with the social value attributable to the significant provision of education places and the impact on the life opportunities of those children and the well-being of all the families involved.
Thank you, Ian. As Ian Scott isn't here, I'm afraid he can't ask a supplementary question. So that brings public questions to an end, and we move on to member questions. And I think we only have one member question, and it's from Gary Cowan, who I think is joining us online. Are you there, Gary?
I'm here, but for some reason I can't seem to get my camera to work.
Yeah, we can hear you but not see you. I hope you're well, Gary.
Yes, I'm not too bad, thank you.
Good.
Just a quick correction. When Colin or Lindsay Ferris made a reference to Andy Bailey's question, there is an index in the core strategy which sets out the exact build in the plan period, and that we don't have a core strategy where we have numbers written in for following periods. That's just a correction. Anyway, my question is, in the wake of COP26, a leading academic predicts that all the climate emergency continues at its current rate, our area will see an increase of 1.4 degrees centigrade by 2040, compared to the average temperature between 1981 and 2000. He added that that means we are expected to live through 2 heat waves a year and 35 days with the roads at risk of melting. The river flood risk could increase by as much as 7.5%, and wildfires are projected to be at risk for 37 days of the year. With the local plan update for Wokingham planning 2,300 houses at Hall Farm close to the Loddon River, what actual guarantees can the Borough Council provide how this development planned to begin in 2040 can be developed safely? Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Lindsay.
Thank you, Gary, for your question. Before turning to the specifics of your question, I need to correct you that in the development proposed for the new local plan will by and large be completed within the period to 2040. It is of course correct that some of the new homes from any large proposal might be delivered in years beyond this. This is recognised in national planning policy, and such circumstances is not uncommon. Moving to the specifics of the question, and as you're already aware, strategic flood risk assessment supports the new local plan. Strategic flood assessment takes account of the projected impact of climate change by applying allowances advised by the Environmental Agency to flood modelling. It is prepared in accordance with the national policy and guidance and involves close review by the Environmental Agency. Whilst work on the new plan continues, the Hall Farm proposal, included within the revised growth strategy consultation in 2021, showed no homes in areas at risk of flooding, which included taking account of the forecast impact of climate change. All the new homes were shown as being located on land uphill from the River Loddon and its other watercourses. In addition to the consideration of flooding in local plan process, and as you are aware, detailed flood risk assessment is required to support individual planning application. These assessments will also need to be taken into account of the impacts of climate change. Lastly, and to comment more widely on climate change and the local plan, we will be including a suite of new policies which reflect best practice in responding to the challenges of climate change, including requiring zero carbon development. New homes are required to ensure people have a place to live, which is essential for life changes. However, our ambition is to enable this whilst mitigating the impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm sure you've got a supplementary question, Gary.
Yes, I have. The report was written by a professor at Reading University and actually relates to this specific area, our area. Last month, the Lib Dem leader rightly said that the government tells councils how many new homes to build and must plan to accommodate and give planning permission for them in a 15-year local plan period. In this week's Wokingham Today, the leader of the council did expand on a strategic partnership agreed with the borough, with the University of Reading. The agreed board consists of the Vice-Chancellor and the Head of Community Engagement at Reading University and the council leader and the borough chief executive, supported by 4 work streams, each led by unnamed senior academics and senior council officers. Perhaps this might explain why 4,500 houses at Hall Farm over a 30-year period on the side of a river that floods has Lib Dem support. It's odd when the government is only asking for a housing plan for 15, not 30 years. As the Lib Dem administration maintains they are fighting excessive housing numbers, yet this 2,300 houses in my question are not legally required by the government, should the administration apologise to our residents for misleading them on housing numbers? It also makes one wonder if other developers involved in the evolving local plan process have been left with an unfair disadvantage by this strategic partnership. Thank you.
I'm tempted to answer that question myself, Gary, but the question wasn't directed at me, so I will leave it to Lindsay.
Gary, thank you. If I remember correct, you were lead on the local plan, our current local plan, the one that runs to 2026. And I think you were instrumental in putting all the SDLs together, built on large spaces of green land space across our borough, some of which run very close to rivers. So I would wonder as to the issue you raise on that, because I've been working very hard, and I gave the answer to the last question, the public question that I just had, where the first part I said, since I took on responsibility for the local plans, I have raised concerns expressed by some residents towards the Hawthorne promotion led by the University of Reading, including the promotion scale of 4,500 homes. In response, the university have indicated that they are undertaking viability work looking at whether a lower scale of 3,750 homes would be viable, taken into account the infrastructure that would be needed to provide it and anticipated landowner development costs in delivering the Garden Village. This would represent a near 20% reduction. And we're still awaiting all the viability results. So you're accusing us of not trying to reduce our numbers. We are waiting for the government to come up with the MPPF, which included in the draft proposals an allowance for over-provision. That over-provision from the local plan that you put together numbers nearly 2,000 homes. So there are 2,000 extra homes in our borough at the moment that are now currently in the local plan that are being provided by the one you put together. And in addition, we still have developments which are going to go well beyond the 2026 period. Whilst in your local plan, you didn't indicate anything beyond the 15 years, by actual work of activity taking place, you go beyond the 2026 period because of the developments either not progressing at the pace you wanted or their extra planning approval occurs. And I think that it'd be much more appropriate to be open and honest as to what's happened. I also like to advise you that the draft local plan that's in the current scheme was not put together by this administration. It was by an administration that you were part of, certainly at some point. And I think that you need to apologise to quite a lot of residents around here for spouting around things that are irrelevant.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. I was going to add something, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to add anything because the question wasn't directed at me, even though I was the subject of at least part of it. I think that brings member question time to an end. So we're going to now move on to item 73 on our agenda, St Crispin's Leisure Centre. And I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that there are some supplementary papers relating to this item. They are on the council's website. They've been published there, but for those who are in the room, they're called public document pack. That public document pack has the questions, I think, or minutes that are relevant to us here. It has a draft minute on St Crispin's Leisure Centre, and it has the substance of what has occurred in overview and scrutiny. The committee, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that dealt with this, the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the chair of that, Chris Johnson, is with us this evening, and welcome to you, Chris. I'm very pleased that you're here. Before I ask you to present a summary of the recommendations of the two meetings of your committee, I wonder whether I could invite first Prue Ray, the Executive Member for Children's Services, and then Ian Shenton, Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure, to actually briefly introduce this item. So, Prue, if you'd like to say a few words first from a Children's Services perspective.
Thank you, Stephen. Obviously, people who've been following this item will know that we've had, sorry, I don't understand. I thought I was speaking. Gary appeared. I'm not sure.
You are speaking. Carry on. Okay. Carry on.
Thank you. This item came to us in the summer. There was a consultation based on the leisure use and some concerns about safeguarding and so on and so on. We have moved a long way since then. We've had two very intense, I think I would say, having been at them, overview and scrutiny meetings, which Chris chaired and which he will tell us about in a minute, going into all the details of the proposals. And where what has become the position is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has endorsed the view that the leisure centre should be transferred to the Circle Trust so that we can expand St Crispin School to provide the school places which otherwise we are at risk of not having, and therefore we would end up with children going trying to go to secondary school and having no places to go to. We are expanding a number of secondary schools. I think that's come out in the minutes of the two meetings, but we do need the places that will be provided at St Crispin's, 330 places over a number of years, 55 a year, to make sure that we don't have children who don't have somewhere to go to school. And I'm very grateful to everybody who's worked so hard to try and ensure that just about every bit of leisure provision that currently goes on in the leisure centre will be provided in the future. And the only thing that needs to go in order for this to happen is the squash during the daytime. And I think for the benefit of the exec members, it's a judgment. Obviously, there are people, disappointed squash players, but and there is a social value to having that sport provision. But there's a social value to having enough places for our children to go to school, and the devastation that could cause to them not having somewhere to go to school would be somewhat worse. So I think Chris can talk through what the committee did. I think it is a welcome scrutiny. It was hard going and they put us through it quite rightly. But this is the way we will be doing things as an administration, that we will be allowing overview and scrutiny to scrutinise what is going on and to add value. And they have added value, because as you will see at the end of the minutes, there's a couple of proposals which I would like to recommend that the executive agree to, because I think they're very sensible. It's a different way of proceeding than the previous administration, who very rarely allowed overview and scrutiny any voice at all in any decision making, and we were left with a situation where we had to call things in after the event if they were not satisfactory, which is not a good way of proceeding. So I'm not afraid of being scrutinised. I think it's appropriate. I think it's the right way to go, and I think as the result we have a set of recommendations which have been thoroughly explored. We are absolutely confident that none of the other options are at all viable through the work of that committee, and the way to go is to transfer the leisure centre to the Circle Trust, who are committed. We heard from the CEO of the Circle Trust on Tuesday. They are committed to maintaining as much of that community use as possible. and it will continue to be used as a polling station as well, because that will be an illegal agreement. So that's, I think, all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prue. Could I ask Ian if you'd like to add anything by way of introduction?
Just briefly, by early summer of this year, it was becoming apparent that St Crispin's, alone amongst our leisure centres, was not recovering post-pandemic in football in the way that the other centres had. They were significantly down, and this wasn't just one aspect of the centre, it was all aspects of usage of the centre. On top of that, we had the increasing awareness of the school places issue. So we went out to consultation on future use of this council asset. A consultation, of course, is a qualitative exercise, not a quantitative exercise. It is not a referendum. It's not a properly balanced market research survey. And what we took out of the consultation were two things. But were it to be transferred to the use of the school, then there would be a significant loss to the squash playing community and a significant loss to some of the older residents of the local area who use some of the classes there. Although it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the class schedule because the school itself was requiring more use of the centre for examination periods, and those periods were getting longer, and sustaining a practical timetable of classes was becoming harder and harder. So we took those points out of the consultation, and those were fed into the mix, and with Prue and Children's Services in discussion with the Circle Trust, we've been able to cover off the vast majority of all the community uses. The classes will be replaced either within our asset, which is being now being managed by Places Leisure, which is BXGFIT in town centre, and potentially using Montague Park Community Centre as well for some of them. That way we were able to cover off all. The only loss will be daytime use of these squash courts by squash players. None of the squash players who use it during the daytime are using them on daytime only. All of them, the daytime users also use them in the evening or at weekend. And we simply see there can be, because they're not fully booked, there can be some transfer in that area. And so I have come to the view, and I fully support the proposal that is contained within the report that went to overview and scrutiny.
Thank you very much, Ian. So, Chris, I would be grateful now if you were able to just take us through your committee's deliberations on this and any additional recommendations, which I think Prue alluded to, additional recommendations you are making.
Thank you. As you will appreciate, this was a very emotive subject for the community to discuss, and there was lots of contact made outside of the meeting with emails and communication with individuals. And yes, we did all in that first meeting appreciate that there was some resentment that this option was being discussed for the consideration that it would be a loss of a community asset. But having asked for additional information to be brought forward to us in a second meeting, and the individual witnesses that came forward from Circle Trust and the school, the executive, etc., we did have a very in-depth and detailed discussion with some very pointed questions asking for guarantees. And we are, as a committee, we are very grateful for the effort that was put in, because it did make our job a lot easier to make our own minds up as individuals as to which direction we should be thinking and leaning in response of supporting the community for what was best for the community. We did appreciate fully that there is a marked need for additional school places, some 1,045 over the 5-year period across the borough, that this particular project would only actually pass on an additional 330 places, and that is in addition to an existing plan activity that's going on at St Crispin's for 179 places. So it is quite a number of places that have to be found, and if we didn't find a solution for St Crispin's for these 330, then yes, that was going to make quite a large impact across the rest of the borough to find places. The other item that we did appreciate is that a conversion of an existing property building is going to be a lot quicker to deliver deliver the solution that's needed for over the next year for the extra 55 places than if there was a new build. We also fully appreciated the cost differences between the two, and we were very happy to find that the process of transferring to St Crispin's to Circle Trust, so the leisure centre facility, isn't actually a loss of the facility. It doesn't give it away. It leases it to them, and that our financial commitment from the council would be limited to that £1 million given to the trust to start the process. The trust would then be responsible for ongoing maintenance and the development of the facility. So financially, there was an instant impact visually in that this is a much better option for the council, other than to have to continue to maintain the property over that length of time and lease it as such to the trust. The costs that the trust were currently paying, because the trust currently block books the facilities, so they are paying money into the council anyway for the use of that facility. And the problem with the block booking, it doesn't alter the structure, and this is the main thing that we found. And I will add that a question that came from the public, I wouldn't say dropped them in it, but it did open our eyes as to the safeguarding issue when they turn around and say that they were challenging the consultation figures for how many people were attending the facility by saying that many of their users don't log in, don't swipe in, so that there is a loss of accountability of who is actually on the site. So that sort of weighs against in certain areas. We have had some very constructive promises and commitments from the Circle Trust as to what they would like to do and how they were going to manage things. I would say that there were some members of the committee that were looking for some guarantees in ink now, written in blood, before we even go down the route. But I fully understand that there's planning permissions to be gained, there's activities and design, etc. There's a lot of work to be done before it actually comes to fruition, and we can see that the promises, the commitments that we've asked for are going to work in practice. So Circle Trust have made a commitment that all out of hours activities that currently occur within the leisure centre will be supported. They will still carry on. There is a commitment for the use of the squash court out of school hours. The only thing they couldn't commit to is the use of the squash court during school hours, and that is for a very sensible reason, that it is shared changing rooms, and it would mean that there would be a mixed environment of adults and children in that facility. Even though the children would be using the main hall, there would be this shared option with the changing rooms, which would negate a lot of things. Because one of the actions that comes out of this would be that there are two rooms in the school itself that are being used for changing rooms at the moment. They would be recovered as school rooms quite quickly. So there's an instant plus for this activity. So within everything that we discussed over these two meetings, and the evidence that was provided to us from the witnesses, and again, I will say thank you very, very much to everybody that turned up and the officers and their effort, what they put into it. We came out with 3 additional recommendations that we'd like to place before you. They're on page 14 of at the back of the document, which is that the St Crispin's Leisure Centre report to the executive on sorry, that's done. I've got to find my bit. So because sorry. Officers be requested to progress the financial viability assessment relating to the Montague Park Community Centre. So there is this other activity going on, and there was just that request from the committee that that financial assessment be carried out, and then progress on the agreement between the council and Circle Trust, along with all other agreements involving schools and leisure facilities, be subject to a report to the committee within 12 months. So this is basically just so we can see how things are going with this particular project and the other projects that might involve schools and leisure facilities.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that report on the 2 meetings and your recommendations. I'm going to ask Prue and then Ian if there's anything they wish to say in response. Prue?
Thank you, Stephen. I don't think so. I think it is perfectly reasonable to ask for a report back to make sure that the things that were promised are being held. But we also have a number of other schools where there are facilities, leisure facilities associated with the school site in some way, shape or form. And I do think we need to get a better picture of what's gone on there, because the landscape of education has changed. And with academisation, what had previously seemed to be a reasonably sensible option of co-locating leisure facilities with schools and other facilities as well, has become a lot more difficult. But we've also got much more increased awareness of safeguarding, as well as quite a lot of pressure on school places. So I think it is a very worthwhile thing to agree to, because having a scrutiny review of that would be very, well, not a scrutiny review, but have scrutiny review it would be very helpful. Montague Park, I think it is designated as a community centre. It has been sitting there for a while, and it has some difficulties. And I think getting the first step sorted out of its financial viability is quite important, because we can't really do anything about it until we know what the finances actually look like. Some money was handed over to the council with it, but it doesn't seem to be adequate. So the sooner we get that underway, the better, because at the moment the community has been promised an asset in the local plan, which the current local plan, that is the one that Lindsay said that Gary was responsible for, and it's not come into use, and we really need to work out why that is and what we can do about it, and hopefully end up with some community use in it. So I welcome both those additional recommendations.
Thank you, Prue. Ian?
I think I would just I'd pick up on the point that Chris made that came out in the committee about safeguarding. I think people were aware that there was potentially a safeguarding issue in that building. And I think what the overview and scrutiny process did was actually highlight the extent of that, because we have pupils from the school at the moment changing in the school, trooping into the sports hall to carry out various sports, whilst there are a random selection of adults potentially in the other parts of the same building who have no DBS check, nothing. And I think that brought to the fore the potential for a safeguarding issue. And I think that is another reason why we should be voting for this report tonight.
Thank you, Ian. Well, can I first of all thank you, Chris, very much for your work on this. Thank all of your committee members for their careful consideration of this difficult issue. I want to thank all those people who responded to the consultation. The qualitative input of that consultation was very valuable. It threw up issues that we were either not aware of or perhaps hadn't been adequately aware of. So that has helped this process. Your committee has played an enormous role in helping this process forward. And I would strongly endorse the comments that Prue made about how your committee has added considerable value to this process. And this is a model we do want to follow, as Prue said, active engagement between the executive and all of the overview and scrutiny committees. So we add quality and value to what is eventually the outcome. And I think we can honestly say this process has improved the situation. I would like to thank your three witnesses as well. Ginny Rhodes, who's the Chief Executive of the Circle Trust, Andy Hinchliffe, who's the Head Teacher of St Crispin's, and Tony Penge, who's the Operations Manager for Places and Leisure. They all appeared at your committee in its second meeting, and I think their presence did add a lot to the deliberations. It enabled, I think, your committee members to get a very clear sense of what the issues were from people who are directly involved. I'd also like to thank all of our officers who've worked very hard to provide your committee with all the information it required for it to make its recommendations. There's been an enormous amount of work gone on between the two meetings of your committee, And I think what we've ended up with is a really very robust process. Now, colleagues, I think as so often when difficult decisions have to be made, we have to try and come down to what the essential ingredients of this are. And as with so many difficult decisions, we have to weigh up the benefits and the harms. Now here, I think it's very clear what the benefit is. The benefit is additional school places and the resolving of safeguarding issues affecting the school. So the educational case is the clear benefit. The harm and the perceived harm was undoubtedly the loss of community facilities in the existing St Crispin's Leisure Centre. Now, if we're able to address the harm and mitigate it with the measures that have been proposed, which I think will substantially mitigate the harms, then I think the benefits become even heavier in the scales. And in this case, my conviction is the benefits now very considerably outweigh the harms. So I would recommend to colleagues that we not only endorse the recommendations in the agenda on pages 18 to 19, but that we would add to them 2 additional recommendations. I mean, your committee in its last meeting, Chris, made 3 resolutions. The first one was effectively to support the recommendations that were going to the executive, so we can put that one aside. But your other 2, which you read out earlier, I would propose that we add to our list of 10 recommendations on pages 18 to 19. So officers be requested to progress the financial viability assessment relating to the Montague Park Community Centre, although what arguably that's covered under our 9th recommendation. I'm happy to add it anyway. And then finally, progress on the agreement between the council and the Circle Trust, along with all other agreements involving schools and leisure facilities, be the subject of a report to the committee. That's the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee within 12 months. So I'm happy to recommend to colleagues that we add those 2. I believe that Imogen wants to say something about the financials on this before we move to a vote.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, I examined this report and I attended both the review and reviewed both the scrutiny and meetings that Councillor Johnson chaired. It seemed to me that even if the council were to retain this facility, it would require extensive investment just in order to continue as it is. However, to be clear, this is not about financial elements. The safeguarding problems you mentioned that the school has highlighted that could end up forcing the leisure centre to close anyway. So trying to make the best of this situation, I agree that the most viable option is to lease the leisure centre to the school. With some of the funding, we put aside for additional school places to help with their renovations. In return, they will be providing us with the much needed extra student places, which seem to be the best of both and the most cost effective for our residents and quite honestly what is best for our children. Just to be clear, it is a statutory requirement for Woking Borough Council to provide school places for all of our children in the area, and St Crispin's is a popular, oversubscribed school with an excellent reputation. The school has agreed to allow us to use the leisure centre when the school is not in session, and it seems that this would meet most of the needs of the current community. Sadly, the changes that the school needs to make to the building and the limited operable hours would not leave it viable for Places Leisure to continue running, but they will be moving some of their classes locally to other locations nearby. To clarify, we are not selling this leisure centre. It is being leased, and I understand that the length of the lease is a Department of Education requirement. The land and the buildings are right next to the school, and as a consequence, for the safety of the school children, it really cannot be used for very many things. I am sure that we can ensure that the lease has the appropriate clauses to guarantee that the leisure centre continues to remain available for the community too. Even if it did not have the safeguarding concerns, building a new school in a different location would be costly and would not happen within the current time frame we need for these students. Agreeing to lease the school to the Circle Trust, who runs the school, is quite honestly the best solution for our residents, both financially, socially, and for the long-term prospects of our children. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Imogen. So because this is a matter of considerable public interest, I'm going to depart from my normal practice, and rather than just referring to the recommendations on page 18 to 19, I'm going to read out the recommendations, and I'm going to read out the 2 additional recommendations we're going to add to them. So the recommendation is that the executive, 1, notes the findings of the public consultation on the future use of St Crispin's Leisure Centre. 2, notes the council's legal responsibility in securing sufficient school places for local residents. 3, approves in principle the closure of St Crispin's Leisure Centre and transfer of the land to St Crispin's School, the Circle Trust, to fulfil the school placement requirements and to continue to deliver 55 extra places each year in the next 5 years, subject to detailed agreement with the Trust, with lease arrangement under relevant academy regulations. 4, notes that the revenue impact of ending the council's leisure contractors' utilisation of the premises will be funded through the Leisure Management Equalisation Fund. 5, notes that the capital expenditure of £1 million for works is funded from the secondary schools expansion budget already approved as part of the 2023-24 capital programme. 6, notes the Circle Trust is keen to work with the council and local communities to continue the local squash provision in addition to the current community activities the school provides. 7, notes that any repurposing of the school must also include the requirements of the council to deliver a polling station at the site for elections as per requirements set out. 8, delegates authority to the Director of Resources and Assets and Director of Children's Services in consultation with the Executive Member for the Environment, Sport and Leisure, the Executive Member for Children's Services and the Leader of the Council to enter into negotiation with Places Leisure to facilitate the closure of St Crispin's Leisure Centre and with the Circle Trust to secure the provision of additional school places and the transfer of the land and buildings from the council to the Circle Trust. 9, delegates authority to the Director of Resources and Assets and Director of Children's Services in consultation with the Executive Member for the Environment, Sport and Leisure, the Executive Member for Children's Services and the Leader of the Council to enter into a negotiation with Places Leisure with regards to the running of leisure activities at Montague Park Community Centre or elsewhere, which will be subject to a financial viability test. 10, notes the attached appendix that provides additional information to support the proposal following the consideration by Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 14th of November 2023. And in addition, 11, requests officers to progress the financial viability assessment relating to the Montague Park Centre, and 12, request that the agreement between the council and Circle Trust, along with all other agreements involving schools and leisure facilities, be the subject of a report to the Community and Corporate Overviews Committee within 12 months. So those are the 12 recommendations. Could I ask for all of those in favour to show? And that is unanimous. Prue is not able to vote as she's not physically present.
I would have voted for it had I been physically present.
Thank you for that, Prue. So that concludes that item. And our next agenda item 74, is the Local Transport Plan 4, the draft for consultation. And this starts on page 55 of your agenda. And as it's only a slim line report, it just goes on to page 508. Paul, you're the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways, and I'd like you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm not going to go through all of this. There's an awful lot of pages.
Thank goodness.
Hopefully you've read them all, but you would have seen some of them previously because we have sent this through to overview and scrutiny, and it's been to executive as well. But firstly, I'd like to thank officers for all the hard work that they've actually put in here into this document, particularly Rob Curtis and his team. Really a lot of hard work they've put into this. It is intended, of course, that the local transport plan 4 replaces our existing local transport plan. That runs from 2011 to 2026. The new one will cover a 10 to 15 year period. There will be daughter documents supporting it, such as the bus service improvement plan, the local cycle walking infrastructure plan, a evolving freight strategy, and an electric vehicle strategy as well. The draft local transport plan 4 and action plan are the main documents which will go out to consultation. I would recommend that they go out in their present form. As we've already heard tonight several times, the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and in this case its working group, have also played their part in this. They've added quality to the documents. They've been a very good critical friend. The amendments are shown on page 60 to 61. They're all listed out there. The timetable is on pages 59 to 60, and we plan for approval in the summer of 2024. The consultation plan will be developed to engage young people, and younger people really did miss out on previous consultations. Very low numbers. It's all the much higher age group, the age group of my age and above. They're the ones who tend to fill these in. So there's going to be a real big focus on getting much younger people to complete these, because it's going to be really for them. Yeah. Because this is what it really aims at, and also certain groups that we're not getting the right representation from as well. So we've got a consultation plan being developed for this, ready for January and February to go out to consultation. So I recommend this goes out to public consultation and look for your approval.
Thank you very much. All we're being asked to do is agree to this going out to public consultation. So I don't think it requires us to have a long debate. So if there are no other comments or questions, can we go to the vote on this? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Right. We now zoom on in our agenda to the next item, which is our Treasury Management mid-year report. And I'm trying to work out when this occurs. You'd think it was going to be, it's going to be 109, yeah. Well, the pagination is not quite the same. It's 149 in ours here. We didn't publish within this all of the massive appendices, I'm glad to say. So it's on page 149 of your agenda, and it's Imogen to present this item.
Thank you, Stephen. Glad you found it in the end.
Yes, I'm glad about it.
Okay, this report is here to update everyone on the status of our investments and loans and the overall management of our Treasury funds within the first 6 months of this year. It also allows us to check that we are meeting all the requirements of the Treasury Management Strategy, which was agreed by all members of this council in February. The standout points I will raise include our net indebtedness. This is because we are using more of our internal funds instead of borrowing externally and having to pay high interest rates. At the moment, this is good as it helps with our funding pressures. We are confident that the cash balances we have can support the level of internal borrowing. The average interest rate on the council's external debt is forecast to be 3.68% across the year. An average rather. This is expected to rise in the next financial year as current loans expire and require refinancing at higher rates. The impact is being monitored. However, currently we estimate the current debt financing financing budgets will be sufficient to absorb the impact. The Treasury investment returns are forecast to be 3 million over this year. This is an improvement from the only 1.4 million we received last year. On page 514, you can see a list of the investments the councils have in place. It does indeed include loans to 9 other councils, as well as other funds. Much of the money used is for this purpose comes from funds that are ring-fenced, such as the money we get from property developments for future infrastructure projects. On page 515, you can also see where we have borrowed money, all of which is much lower rates than you would get today. In all, I think you can see we are managing our debt and making our money work to the benefit of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imogen. Are there any comments or questions?
Who's got a hand up?
Sorry, Prue.
Yes, so thank you, Stephen. Earlier on this evening, we had a question from Mr. Meadowcroft, who I don't want to leave in this position. Mr. Meadowcroft is not someone who I'd expect to make something up, but he has clearly misunderstood something or got something wrong, because Imogen would never have claimed that the FCA was responsible for overseeing our loans as an individual council, because they're nothing to do with us. So I think we should undertake as an executive to look into how this has arisen as a misunderstanding, and get back to Mr. Meadowcroft to try and explain it to him, because I am sure that it's a misunderstanding and not not something that we should allow to lie, because I think it felt very uncomfortable earlier on this evening, and I'm sure Mr. Meadowcroft wouldn't want to be making a false accusation. If we can just sort it out, it would be very helpful.
I'm sure we will, Prue. You may not have been able to hear as you were online, but when Philip finished his supplementary and Imogen gave her answer, it was clear that Philip was still not happy, and I undertook to engage with him, and that's an offer I've made then, and I'll repeat now. I don't think it necessitates the whole executive to engage with Philip, but I will do so happily.
I have here, I've been sent by one of the officers what actually was set, and all it says is that our accounting processes are required to meet regulations set by the Financial Conduct Authority. It does not say anywhere that we are a member of the Financial Conduct Authority. All they are doing is validating the national process that we are using through the SIPA regulations. That I think is what the misunderstanding is.
Okay, well, I'll discuss this with Philip outside the meeting. Thank you for that, Prue. If there are no other comments or questions, could we go to a vote? We're asked to support the Treasury Management report and recommend it to Council. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So carried. We now move to the final item on our agenda. This is the Council Plan Extension 2023, which appears in the paper copy as page 159, your agenda. And colleagues will know that the Council is working with key stakeholders in the voluntary and charitable sector, town and parish councils, business, faith groups, health providers, police, the fire service, the youth council, schools, the University of Reading and the wider public on a jointly authored community vision, which will establish priorities of the community, of the people of the borough for the years to come. And as we will be drawing up a new council plan based on the community vision, we will need to bridge the gap between the expiry of the current council plan and the completion of the work on the community vision. So that's going to necessitate us extending the life of the current plan for a further year. The extended council plan, which you're asked to endorse this evening, will be based on the current one, with some additions to reflect the council's new emphasis on partnership working and a new introduction written by the chief executive and the leader. I don't know whether there are any questions or comments. I was going to say I can't imagine there will be, but Sarah has one.
No, it was just a comment. I mean, I appreciate this is about the extension of the existing plan, but I just wanted to actually thank you, Stephen, as well for the work that you're doing on developing this community vision that has meant that we're needing to extend the current plan to make sure we get that community vision in place. I think for quite a while it's been viewed that the council's sort of done stuff to people rather than with, and I think that's not across all areas, but that has certainly been how people have perceived it. And I know, talking to a lot of our partners now, when I speak to them, they are finding the approach really refreshing, and it's a credit to you and your vision. But I also want to mention specifically Jackie and Louise as well, and Sally's team, who are doing a fantastic job. And I just hear some amazing stuff said about them and the work that they're doing. This is the way, you know, it should be going forward, and just, yeah, credit where it's due.
Well, thank you very much for those kind comments. Well, kind as far as I was concerned, I think absolutely merited so far as our officers are concerned. And I would endorse that. Our officers have worked very hard on both the community vision and wider partnership working. And I'm incredibly grateful for their efforts. I do think this is really important work, which will make a real difference to the way in which the council serves the community, which we're here to serve. So thank you for that, Sarah. If there are no other comments or any questions, can we move to the vote on the 3 recommendations on page 159? Are you all happy with those? Thank you very much. Everyone is? That's great. Thank you very much. And I think that concludes proceedings for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.